Gold is what we will be looking at today. Now, looking at the daily time frame, if you guys remember, we were actually talking about gold for quite a while, right? We were looking at this sort of big move to the downside. We initially had that sort of push back to the upside, and then we had this rejection zone coming up. Now, we were looking at this potential head and shoulders to play out. So we've got, you know, obviously our general sort of technical analysis, and we've got a bit of Elliott wave analysis in here as well. So obviously we have that nice head and shoulders play out. We can see where it rejected, where the basis of these candles sort of opened and closes. We see that rejection zone. If we look to the right, we can see rejected. So that's roughly about the 1725.70 mark, guys. That's kind of what we have here on the charts. But looking at how we could have potentially, like, how can we have caught this move? So going back to the 4-hourly time frame, looking at the structure to the downside. Now, I'll show you guys the technical side of things, and I'll show you guys a bit of Elliott wave as well. So looking at this, we'll get a nice little line out, and we can start drawing it from, I would say, from here. Right, we can see a nice wedge pattern starting to form, right? That was sort of the structure looking. We had a nice break to the upside, rejection, nice wick rejection, pushing further higher. As soon as we broke out of that trend line, nice potential entries. Now, when we speak about these patterns, trading back into these patterns, what I mean by that is, obviously, if we have got the pattern coming to the downside, if we trade back into that pattern, right, that's back into it. This is away from it to in the opposite direction. But we're trading back into this pattern. What we always need to look for, keep in mind, are these internal support / resistance zones. Now we see them use this as a time for the market to stop, to maybe catch a breath, and this could also be an opportunity for us to get back into it. Now we need to keep in mind, guys, we can't just trade whenever we want to, right? We need to have an idea of when the market's going to move, because if we took a trade here when there's no volume in the market, obviously you guys can see we're in a pretty messy situation. So wait for perhaps the UK market or the US market to kick in, and we know there will be some potential volume in the market. We saw a nice big push to the upside, rejections again. Looking back to the left, we saw some consolidation zones, right? This massive consolidation zone where we're sitting on right now is just under that 1800 mark zone, right? So again, rejecting a big psychological level. We saw this being held up previously back over here. We saw some wicks getting close to it as well previously. So we need to keep in mind about that zone. So currently, a couple of things we can look for right now is we could potentially see the market catch another breath, come back down to these sort of internal, again, support / resistance zones. Previous resistance, hopefully we can turn to support. What we could look for is maybe something like this, and to either continue further high or break down into this pattern, depending on what we receive, what the market gives us when we reach these zones. Now, if we get a break above this area, ideally what we'd want to look for is, we need to keep in mind, look how wide the zone is, guys. That's the one thing we need to keep in mind, right? Look how wide the zone is that we could be trading in, right? So this is a pretty major zone that the market could potentially be stuck in. So gold really is in a bit of a troublesome zone. So ideally, what we want to look for is we want to look for moves. If you are looking on short-term time frames, you can maybe look for a quick burst to that area. But again, gold is pretty expensive, and it's you know, the spread sometimes can be a bit annoying. So you really want to be trading it during good market hours. So the US session would be pretty great. Again, we're approaching another consolidation zone. So ideally, guys, I would say the move is pretty much already missed, right? So the entry, there was an entry back down here. There was a potential entry over here to the upside. But currently, the train's already left. So what can you look for to get back on board? Now, to get back on board, we can either come all the way back to the top, look for potential rejections of the area to push further back down lower, keeping in mind, again, the support / resistance zones coming up. If we break this high, guys, there could be potential entries, and even if we do come back for a retest of the high to push the market further higher, right? So there's a couple of options. Gold, guys. Now, looking at the Elliott wave side of things, let's have a quick look at the Elliott wave side of things. Now, we do know we've got this bit of ending diagonal coming up. Well, in technical analysis, we have a wedge. So ideally, we could probably be looking at an ending diagonal, right? Now, we do know that this is a new higher low, sorry. So we ideally could maybe look at this, seeing maybe this is a wave 2. So we need to try and see what we can have inside of it, right? We can see a big sort of correction. We see a couple of big corrections, but we see two main pushes in this market. We see the push down here, and obviously this big push down here. So we could maybe say A, B, and C all the way down here to finish off that wave 2. All right, if you guys can see that wave 2. Okay, now let's have a look at the wave counter here. Now we know we can see a clear, if we look for the strongest move in the market, we see a clear push to the downside, which is our most likely our third wave. We can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the downside. We can see A, B, C, very messy correction to the upside, and we see this big push to the downside, right? Now we need to try and figure out what this is. We can potentially look at it at 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is very, very ideal. We see an ending diagonal, we see a big A wave is a nice strong 5 to the downside, nice impulse wave, and you see his ending diagonal is a nice sort of slowing down the market. Again, we get that slowing, we get that rejection, the market's uncertainties kicking in, and then we have a blast to the upside, and then we again have this consolidation kick in, lower sort of volume. People don't really know, the people who are trading now currently generally don't really know what they're doing. They're uncertain, was this market to push to the upside, and then the confidence kicks back in again, right? So a bit of Elliott wave. So potentially what this means is we could look for further moves to the upside, but remember, in this waves 1 and wave 2, but 3, we need to see some corrections before we move further higher, and we can use these internal support / resistance areas to start those, to be the catalyst for them. All right, guys, gold time frames. This was the Elliott wave analysis, technical analysis, full on breakdown, guys. Stay tuned, trade safe.